Welcome to another video, and this one's quite a tricky one to discuss, and we're talking about the TMJ and more specifically TMJ disorder. So really going to look into really what are the causes behind this, because finding the cause is really the most successful treatment. But as you're about to see, there's more than one thing to look at. It's quite a complex joint to discuss. So firstly, it's a good idea to understand what the TMJ actually is. So they're basically two joints in front of found just in front of the ear there, and basically they connect the lower jaw bone to the bones of the skull on each side of the head, and their main purpose obviously is to control the motion of our jaw, so all the movements up and down, side to side, forward, back, and to do all the things that we want to do in life, that we take for granted, which are just like basic talking, eating, yawning, singing, just pretty much everything. So when they're intact, they're the only joints in the human body that work together as a unit. So there's a lot of very interesting things about the TMJ that is also explained why it's so difficult to correct it when there's a problem. So when you open your mouth, the rounded upper ends of the mandible on each side of the jaw glide along the joint socket at the base of the skull. So they basically slide back to the original position when you close your mouth. So to keep this motion working smoothly, there's a soft disc between the condyle and the socket. The disc, it basically absorbs the shock to the joint from chewing and other movements that we make, because we can apply a massive amount of force through the jaw. So we need to have something that absorbs the shock. So maintaining the health of the TMJ is really, really important, because if you have a problem with your jaw, you're going to have a problem eating food, having problem talking, even breathing. And I know this firsthand because I have this problem myself, and have had for the last since about July or August last year, and during hard lockdowns of COVID. And a lot of the things I talk about in this video I'm actually going through myself right now. I'm actually succeeding, which is why I've been inspired to make this video. So maybe others out there who feel like there's nothing that can be done will see that there's maybe something they've missed in their treatment as such. But there's one thing that's really important. There's no denying it's the most used, most necessary, possibly the most misunderstood set of joints in the body. I know a lot about rehabilitation and injury in this, but I really admit I really didn't understand a lot about this particular joint until I suffered with it myself, and seeing a lot of therapists and that, I didn't really seem to get too many solutions, just because it's just so complicated to work with. So one other thing I did discover is just how common it really is. So some of the research that's out there in the US, for example, sort of indicating there's as much as 40 to 75% of people with indicating at least one sign of TMJ disorder. So they don't necessarily have jaw pain, but they're on the cusp of getting it. So it's actually significantly greater in females than males. So it sort of suggests some sort of hypermobility there. I've got a hypermobility through my upper body in particular. A lot of joint problems with my arms, wrists, fingers, shoulders. So there's some sort of element to the joint laxity that's a real problem with this. So but yeah, that's quite an alarming statistic to see something like that. So as I mentioned at the beginning, find the cause is critical. Very confusing joint to understand, and some of the problems with that is because its symptoms mimic other problems, so migraine, neck pain, headaches, neck tension, all those sort of things. And you could be treating a neck problem, and it probably is a neck problem there, but it could be a real problem with the way that your jaw's functioning. And migraines as well, sort of treating a person for migraines when it could be a jaw problem. May not feel the problem in the jaw, but it's referring. So the cause can differ from one person to the other too. So it's not always the same. There's so many different. So there's musculoskeletal problems, but as you'll see, there's a psychological problem behind this one as well. So But you've got to really get to the true cause of the problem if you're really going to get on top of this one, because you can't just treat it with anti-inflammatories or exercises, say, as you could with knee injuries. This one has a real psychological component attached to it. So some interesting facts about the TMJ and the TMJ disorder is basically your teeth should never be touching. No, the teeth should never come in contact during normal chewing, and this is a real issue with me because my back teeth keep touching all the time, and I keep biting my cheek, and it's really, and my teeth don't line up. All these sort of things. Teeth grinding. A lot of people are familiar with this if they have suffered it and been told, then they've got to wear a retainer, which we'll touch on some of the effectiveness of those later on. But it's very much the most common source of problem, and teeth grinding usually is associated with stress, so hence the psychological component. So with teeth grinding, you start to wear away tooth enamel, and this is a real problem for dentists. Will have a real problem with that. Real problem for your teeth. So, and to wear away tooth enamel, which is the hardest substance in our body, it takes a real effort. So that clenching and the force associated with it is massive with our jaw. So the stability of the TMJ comes from the neck as well as the teeth. So, and our cheek muscle is the second strongest muscle in our body, and the strongest muscle in our body is the tongue. So you can see just how much force can be applied through that TMJ, through the two strongest muscles you have being used all the time for things that we think nothing of. And if you're grinding at night, you can just imagine like how much strain you can place through that joint if it's never getting a break. All right, so what causes it? Well, it's where it gets confusing because there's so many things to consider. I'll try to keep this video reasonably short, but as you see, there's quite a few things, and I'm only just scratching the surface on this. So I do encourage you to look in the description because there's a link to an article that goes into a lot more detail of all these things. So most of the time, the cause of the TMJ disorder is a combination of muscle tension and postural dysfunction with the joints and the structures of the neck and shoulders. But as I've said several times, what cannot be ignored is the psychological component that is actually driving it all. So the factors are really going to come back to habits. So there's going to be a lot of poor repetitive habits, either posturally, movement, or way you're sitting, all that sort of stuff, sleeping, as well as psychological ones that have to be transformed into new ones. So, but in order to do that, you have to identify the old ones to be able to change them. Because if you don't know what to change, how can you change it to a good one if you don't even know you need to change it? So starting with the postural ones, so forward head posture, we all know it's not good for our neck, but it's a huge problem to the jaw. And the reason is because there's a massive correlation between the forward head posture and a jaw that is pushed backwards. So this can lead to the development of the TMJ disorder and begins to pinch the pad behind the disc that we spoke about at the beginning. This limits your blood supply, stretches out the ligaments, strains all the muscles that around the jaw that start to lead to spasms that just consistently drive chronic pain and create lockjaw, incorrect bite, all these different things that you can experience. All right, so this forward head posture is really intimately linked to the development of this happening. So if you're a person that's aware of this posture right now, you may not have jaw pain, but you're at a very high risk of getting it. All right, so the habits, what are the habits that lead to that? Well, obviously slouching in chairs is a real obvious one to look for. A lot of the iPhones, which are that last picture, text neck, they're beginning to call this. So these two pictures here are classic, so it's working on a computer, staring at an iPhone all day, slouching in a chair to use a laptop. So we're all very much aware of the problem from sitting. If leaving it go on for a long time ends up with a dowager's hump, it's almost impossible to reverse something that's evolved into that. There's also some nutritional things behind that, but I won't go too much into that right now. But that's a real problem. But it's not just sitting. We have to also be aware of our posture during walking, even how we stand, our sleeping position, which I'll go over in a minute, occupations that we may be using, so a certain occupation we're in may force us into this. Hobbies, musical instruments are another classic one. Sports cycling, and I'm a cyclist, is a horrible position for the neck. It gets stuck and jammed into this horrible position, and it just has to be, because otherwise if you don't have your head turning up, you won't be able to see where you're going and you'll smash. Gym exercises, so lots of poor abdominal exercise, even poor exercise technique, even with a good exercise. So basically anything that places in a forward leaning position for a long time or repeatedly for hours on end is enough to create this posture. So you have to identify anything that you're doing as a forward head posture within sort of things like this, identify it and change it. All right, and that could take some time. The sleeping one is a real big one because we just spend so long sleeping. Like we spend hours, we know we're going to do it for like 6 to 8 hours or 9 hours every day. So if you're sleeping in a horrible position, say like with a pillow that's too big, like this one, this is going to give you an issue with your neck. If you sleep on your back, a lot of people like to sleep on their side. Sleeping on the side can be a problem for twisting the spine and also force the neck out of alignment. If you go into a fetal position, you'll definitely go into a forward head posture as well. So if you do like to sleep on your side, make sure you have place a pillow between your legs and try to switch sides to avoid the repetitive stress, because even sleeping on one side can actually push the jaw out of position as well by having too much force placed upon it. By far the best position is sleeping on your back because it allows your spine and muscles to lengthen and prevent these problems, but you must have a pillow that's reasonably small and support underneath your knee so you don't go into hyperextension and arch your back too much. Alright, so the sleeping on your back with a small pillow, you can see from the picture here, so this is where the neck is in neutral alignment, so it's got its normal cervical curvature. This is where the pillow is too high, as we saw in the last one, and this is where the pillow is too low, so it exaggerates, so you get too much curvature. So there's a lot of pillows out there you can get on the internet these days that help you with this. So, but it does. If you're not a back sleeper, it does take a bit of time. You just can't change to that straight away. You just need a bit of time, and you might have to mix between side and back sleeping. But if you can, and you do have TMJ problems, the best position is on your back. All right, it'll really help you to overcome things a lot quicker. Stress. Now this is a huge topic in its own right. This video could go for 2 hours if we just talk about stress. Most of us are very aware of the damage it does to our body with our joints, but also our immune system. Very hard to say to a person just stop stressing. It's not as simple as that. That's why it's complicated to get rid of. You're going to have to look at various things to get on top of it, but just be aware that with stress often comes clenching and grinding of the teeth, and you're going to be really ramping up these problems with the TMJ. So when the body's stressed, and the reason we clench, just because it prepares our body to be tensed up to either fight someone or run away. All right, it's just our instincts that are inbuilt into our brain to do that. So it would be necessary. It's a good thing if we needed to save ourselves from instant death, but if we're doing it for all day, it's not a good problem. And this comes back to the amount of force that you actually apply through the jaw here. There's 300 pounds of force per square inch to your teeth, cranium, ligaments, cartilage, and disc within the TMJ from clenching and grinding. 300 pounds. That's a lot of force per square inch. So you can see, like, it's not this is not necessarily just a postural problem. Could be the psychological thing that's actually driving the postural problem. So this would be the underlying cause, not necessarily the forward head posture itself. With stress comes poor breathing, because we tend to breathe faster and we hyperventilate. So with anxiety, all that sort of stuff, but even in the fight or flight, your breathing increases, and we often open our mouth to get more air. So this poor breathing reaction sets off chain reaction that wreaks havoc on the body. So and this is in the sleeping position where people open their mouth. Now when people open their mouth, that's really bad for a lot of reasons, but with the TMJ itself, that tongue comes away from the roof of the mouth. The tongue needs to be on the roof of the mouth. That's its resting position, which plays a huge role in stabilizing the jaw and keeping everything in balance. So, and obviously stops, and then the teeth grinding becomes less of a factor as well. So meditation, nose breathing, a great way is to find a way to control and your reaction to the stress. Tai Chi, various other things. I read these books here are great books to read about nose breathing and the Buteyko method. They're a very simple book with some really simple psychology type strategies and a relaxation CD. Basically, just find whatever works for you. All right, there's no real definitive answer on this one that I could give to you. Just lots of possibilities for you to explore and try. If you're really struggling, definitely get psychological help with that, because you're going to just suffer with constant pain. The nose breathing. So this is where the nose breathing really creates the best posture and the body mechanics. So the poor posture will just lead to inefficient labour breathing and create more and more tension in your shoulder muscles, which end up becoming your respiratory muscles instead of your diaphragm. And you end up on top of all of that, you start to have a real pH imbalance between oxygen and carbon dioxide. So everything in the homeostasis gets thrown out of whack as well, which I've done videos on this before. Again, check the description on the video there, because there's a detailed article about all the different things with breathing that gets disrupted from mouth breathing. So the main problem with the TMJ though is the tongue comes away from the roof of the mouth, and this is the most important habit you're going to need to change. As I said before, it's the resting place of the tongue, and it's extremely important to make sure your teeth stay apart. And it's important to have your tongue on the roof, as opposed to this picture here where I could show you the tongue. But you really should have the tongue on the roof of the mouth with your lips closed, and that's the most optimal position for our jaw to be relaxed but stable. All right, so that it avoids clenching and the teeth coming together, and it avoids all the different problems that set all the things in motion. So the easiest way to find that resting position of your tongue is when you say the letters N, T, D, or L. I've highlighted the letter N here because that's the one that works for me the best. When I say the letter N, and you could also do it if you make a clucking sound with your tongue. That's another way to work out where that tongue actually needs to be positioned. So sometimes children are taught these to pronounce words correctly, as you can see in these positions below. And this is a really handy way to remember where that tongue's got to be positioned, and all day long you can be reminding yourself saying these letters, or in this case I'm going to say letter N. N is the one that works for me the best. And then once that helps me to find that best position, and then I can do some exercises that I'll show you quickly at the end. So basically, if the tip of the tongue touches the front teeth at all whenever you say those letters, or when it's where you feel like it's in a resting position, they call this tongue thrust. And this is where you need to retrain your tongue to sit a little bit further back on that palate of the roof of the mouth there. So because the tongue thrust can actually move your teeth and again disrupt the joints of the jaw. So the best way to train to get rid of the tongue thrust is to train it to sit where it's supposed to sit. Hence, that's why I say the letter N all the time. And just by doing that, it's like doing little bicep curls to make my tongue stronger to sit in the place where it's supposed to sit, or where it did once before all the problems started for me. All right. You'll also find that people will begin to swallow incorrectly because their tongue is not in the correct place. So one thing I found hard was trying to keep that tongue there without me forcing it there, and the way that it's meant to work there is with gentle suction and by keeping your mouth closed. If you open your mouth, you'll lose the suction. So when you're swallowing, if you have a glass of water, and there's a little thing that we'll do in a second, but your teeth should, that's the only time your teeth would gently touch. So in order to swallow correctly, your tongue needs to be in good shape and function the way it's designed. This is where people will reinforce their TMJ disorder from poor tongue position when they're swallowing. So you can see just how often how often you'd swallow throughout the day from drinking and eating, how many repetitions of this setting everything in motion, hence why it's so difficult to get on top of this problem. So if your tongue's not strong enough, you won't be able to sit in the right place, and you'll never get on top of things. So any poor posture in the neck and head will also create problems with how you swallow. So here's a little exercise you can do. So you take a sip of water and notice how you swallowed. Did your tongue touch the back of your front teeth? Did your teeth need to clench? Did your neck or your head move when you tried to swallow? If you answered yes to any of these, then you know you've got a problem with swallowing. All right, so this is where the forward head posture is linked to this teeth clenching and poor tongue position. Now, retainers, I mentioned this at the beginning, this is where one of the first things people are prescribed, and I was prescribed one of these as well, and told to wear it to bed every night, and often as I can, and I had been doing so, and it didn't really make much difference at all. Made a little bit of a change, but not really. And when you look into it, a lot of the research shows that these devices can actually make things worse, and in only 25% of the time the symptoms seem to improve. So, which is not a very good thing, seeing that's the strategy that most people just rely on. The real reason for that is because while the retainer may stop you grinding your teeth enamel away, which is why dentists will like it, doesn't necessarily stop you from actually grinding that retainer itself. You could be clenching that retainer all the time by still biting down on it. So you're not damaging your teeth anymore, but you're still damaging the TMJ itself. So put simply, the retainer is not addressing the reason you're clenching your teeth in the first place. All right, so it's definitely something you can try, and definitely I would suggest to use it, but if that's all you're going to rely on to get rid of your problem, you're not going to get very far. So what can you do? Well, no-brainer here, improve your posture. So, this is an example of a photographer who worked with us for a while, and she had a forward head posture. This was her, and when we first saw her, and this is her probably about a year and a half later. Was that 11th of December 2014 and 8th of August of the year later, so a year and a half later, and we made significant difference, and you can see here her head weighed 5 kilos by the end of it, but it weighed about 14 kilos at the beginning. So that head position, because it acts like a lever from moving further and further forward. So part of her problem was her job itself, which she wasn't going to quit her job. So we had to devise postural correction exercises around that. So again, check the description under the video, because I'll give you heaps of things. Go through all the different things on that. This video will go for about 3 hours. So I've just sort of letting you know you need to improve your posture, but how you do it, there's a lot of stuff you need to do for that. Improving your breathing, as we spoke about before, so learning for psychological reasons with meditation, calming the mind, but keeping the mouth closed, breathing through the nose. Very, very, very important, right? So this is a really big one to get right. Controlling your stress, well, that's sort of linked to the last one, but obviously it's not just improving your breathing you might need to work on. There's a lot of things that you might have to work through with that. You might need some help on trying to get on top of that, but this is another big problem. This is a real underlying reason for the clenching. All right, so these first 3 things alone should make a huge difference to getting on top of things. You may not even need to go into some of these jaw exercises that we're about to do. So you will need to practice jaw things and resting that jaw on the tongue on the roof of the mouth, etc. But like I said, you may have knocked all of them off from just doing these first 3 things here. 1, 2, 3. All right, just getting on top of them, you're really most of the way there. The jaw exercises that I do, well, firstly, training the tongue and the teeth to stay apart. All of these you need to do in a really good posture. You can't do them in a poor posture. So this first one, this was a big game changer for me. And I would do this when I was just practicing to relax my breathing. So basically you just sit in your good posture, you let your jaw completely relax, which I found actually quite difficult to do. So I had to let my mouth just hang open, but at the same time I had to keep my lips closed. You don't want your lips to come apart, but you want your jaw to be relaxed, so I found that quite difficult. Once the tension's gone, place the tongue on the roof of the mouth, and again using the end position like I said before. Now try to close the mouth, keeping your teeth slightly apart. Lastly, breathe through your nose and try to keep your jaw relaxed. So you could go to a completely wide open jaw and then close. So I tried to just sort of have my teeth come apart as wide as I can, but keep my lips closed. You could open your mouth as well, but I just found it was more effective when I did it the other way. So, but this is really something, just doing thousands of these a day, as often as you can. Controlling jaw opening, I had a real locked jaw. I still do to some extent. You don't want to force the mouth open. If you've tried to force it open, you're going to create more problems. So you just want to gently sort of do this one. So again, in perfect posture, find the end position with the tongue, and then basically open and close your mouth 10 to 15 times, making sure the tongue stays on the roof of the mouth. So don't force it too wide, but just open it as wide as you can without sort of any crunching, grinding, clicking, or pain, definitely no pain. And keep that tongue on the roof of the mouth, and just do that 10 to 15 times. Tongue push-ups, so if like you've used push-ups to make your arms and chest and that stronger, we can do the same thing for the tongue. So again, just pushing the tongue up on the roof of the mouth, hold it for 10 to 20 seconds, and then repeat it 5 to 10 times. You could do this with your mouth closed or your mouth open. Mouth open actually sort of stretches the tongue. All right, but very simple way to try and strengthen the tongue itself. So in summary, the jaw pain, very debilitating. I know about it firsthand. It's been a real problem for me. Just like walking, we tend to take it for granted, but we're using it all the time, and when it becomes a problem, it becomes a huge problem to our daily life. Getting rid of it really comes back to finding what's the underlying trigger. You know, finding what that is, changing it, improving your posture, your breath, your ability to breathe through your nose, getting and controlling your stress, and then obviously this tongue and roof of the mouth and teeth apart. That's really what it comes down to, those 4 things. So if you can get on top of that, you'll be well on the way. So for detailed stuff on the postural stuff, all of that is really included in my shoulder program here that we put together, obviously for shoulder pain, but it has a real high relationship with posture and also neck pain. So, you know, this has from over memory about 100 exercises I think I included in this, with all the stretches, mobility, stability, strength, things related to it. So if you're really struggling to work on your posture, you'll find everything you need to know is in there. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'll see you on our next one.